Okay.
Okay, here we go. Then our debate on TeleABA and the in-home ABA. The presenters that we have are me. My name is Shanice. I will be the moderator and the concluder. I am an RBT from Michigan. Nicole will be presenting first for telehealth ABA. She is an RBT from Colorado. Hannah will present on in-home ABA, both the pros and the cons, and she is an RBT from Texas. So we will start our presentation with autism awareness. 1 in 59 children will be diagnosed with ASD, according to the CDC. The challenges that many face that are diagnosed with ASD are delayed or impaired speech, maintaining and understanding relationships, deficits in independent living skills, and much more. ABA therapy has shown to be helpful to overcome these challenges. ABA on changing behavior to develop socially significant skills. It is recommended that this therapy start as early as possible to increase the chances of skill development. ABA therapy has mainly been used in clinical and in-home settings, but there has been a recent upward trend of using technology to deliver ABA. And here we have, let me screen share for you guys, and she will tell you more about ABA.
My name is Rachel Comment. I'm a board-certified behavior analyst, and applied behavior analysis uses the principles of behavior to increase behaviors that we want. ABA can be helpful in increasing social skills, daily living skills, functional skills, academic skills. ABA can help decrease tantrum behaviors, self-injurious behaviors, non-compliant behaviors, pretty much anything the child needs to be successful in his or her daily life. The intake begins when a neuropsychiatrist refers the parent to receive ABA services. The parent will then call and speak to one of our FCAs, who will set up a time for the parent and one of the board-certified behavior analysts to meet. They'll meet and they'll kind of talk about what concerns they have about their child, what's going on. From there, the board-certified behavior analyst will set up an evaluation with the child. They'll look at different skills across from social to listener responding skills, expressive language, and from there the BCBA will write the report. And then the BCBA and the parent will meet again to go over the report. The BCBA will give their recommendations for how many hours and where they think the services will take place, and then services begin shortly after that.
Okay. So that was a quick overview of what ABA is, therapy. Next, we will go over the need. So the prevalence of autism has been on the rise in recent years. As I said before, 1 in 3 ASD, which is up from 1 in 68 in 2004 and 1 in 88 in 2008. With the numbers of individuals with ASD diagnosis on the rise comes an increased need of ABA services and BCBAs. Though the field of ABA is slowly growing, it is not people who have ASD and are seeking services. We have a graph here that shows the distribution right here. Share it. So here you go. If you look at this graph, it shows each state and then the black is the need. So as you can see, like the gray areas would be the BCBAs. So in some states such as California, Florida, Texas, they're pretty good. But there's other states, Connecticut, they need more therapists. Now I will describe the difference of in-home ABA is implemented in the home with a BCBA overseeing services and trained therapists or techs implementing interventions. With in-home services, the individual receives direct therapy from a trained professional. Parents may be involved in the services provided and receive on-site training from the therapist. This has been a common practice in ABA since it has been implemented. TeleABA, on the other hand, is therapy that is implemented in the home by a parent or caregiver. Parents and caregivers are trained remotely by a BCBA through methods such as video conferencing technology. This method of training provides the opportunity for individuals to receive services who live in remote locations, who otherwise would not have access to ABA therapy. So the benefits of in-home ABA versus TeleABA. And each person will have 5 minutes for each pro and con and rebuttals. So Nicole will start us off with pro TeleABA.
Thanks, Shanice. Hi, everyone. Like Shanice has explained, I will be going over both the pros and the cons for TeleABA. So with the number of individuals with ASD on the rise, there's an increased need for BCBAs to provide services to those individuals who are seeking it. As Lindgren and colleagues explained in their study, individuals who live in rural communities often struggle to find ABA providers that service their area. And this lack of services leads to more significant difficulties and delays for those individuals as compared to those who live in urban areas and have more access to ABA services. Individuals from rural areas often have to travel a great distance to get ABA services, which is costly. I mean, due to the amount of gas it's required to travel. And not only is the gas costly, but when you have that much of a distance to travel, I mean, this may mean taking off time from work, having the individuals who are getting services have to take time off from school, and it may mean that these individuals don't receive an adequate amount of therapy just due to the time it takes to travel back and forth and the hassle that puts on the families. To combat the gap between the number of individuals who are seeking ABA services and those who actually have providers in their area, people have begun using TeleABA as a solution. TeleABA closes the gap between the number of service providers and the individuals who seek services in those rural areas. And like Shanice briefly explained in the introduction, services are provided over a web-based platform from a qualified BCBA or a therapist. Because it's provided over a web-based platform, this means that services are available to anyone who has a computer and access to internet, and the therapy is actually implemented by the individual's families or that individual's caregiver. Because therapy is actually implemented by the family members or caregivers and they are trained to implement that, it just increases that family's confidence or the caregiver's confidence overall when handling challenging behaviors as it relates to their loved ones, and they gain confidence in actually providing that therapy, not only during the therapy sessions, but just it increases their overall quality of living. Because TeleABA is implemented in the home, this means that families don't have to spend as much time traveling back and forth. They can do it, they can implement the therapy at a time that's convenient for them, which means that the families are able to spend more time at work or more time in school because they can provide the therapy, like I said, when it's convenient for them to do so. So TeleABA, not only is it more time effective for the families, but it's also more cost effective as well, because you don't have to travel back and forth, and individuals will actually be able to receive more therapy overall because it's being provided by their families or their caregivers. And now I am going to share my screen to show you a visual. Okay, so as you can see by looking at this graph, it gives you the breakdown of average weekly treatment costs per child. The first bar graph there on the left is in-home therapy, and the black portion of that is the staff cost, and then the darker gray on top of that is the facility cost, and then the light gray at the top is the overall family cost. So as you can see, the one on the left is in-home therapy. The one in the middle is telehealth that is provided from a clinic. And then the one all the way over on the right is telehealth that's provided in the home. And as you can see, there's a significant difference in weekly costs between in-home therapy, in-home telehealth. So I would say it's roughly about $275 per child for the overall family cost per week for in-home therapy versus $150 for services that are provided in-home for telehealth. And now I am going to go over the cons to TeleABA. So because TeleABA is provided over a web-based platform, there are concerns that you might be running the risk of violating HIPAA, as confidential information could be leaked over the internet, and that would allow others to access this information. Also, when you're providing services to individuals through this web-based platform, the individuals who are implementing procedures, like the families or caregivers who are actually implementing the interventions, may not be doing so with fidelity. And there's no accountability for the BCBA or therapist, as they aren't there in person to physically intervene or provide suggestions on the go during this time when the families are implementing services. And because the BCBA or therapist isn't providing services in person, you're just left to rely on the family's account of, what's occurring, how the interventions are actually going, if it's truly successful or not. And this may mean that individuals aren't receiving adequate services, and you could potentially be doing more harm than good if these interventions aren't effective, if they aren't being implemented with fidelity. And like I said, there's no BCBA or therapist to physically intervene or be there in person just to do these quality checks throughout those sessions. And one last con to TeleABA is that services may not be available to everyone in these rural areas, as you do need to have a computer and access to internet. And typically those in rural communities tend to be less affluent than those in urban areas. Therefore, they might not have access to the computer and internet. And now I am going to counter the cons. And so when providing services over the internet, yes, you do run the risk of violating HIPAA, as information may be leaked, but there are actually secure platforms that are used by telehealth providers all over the world that they're secure platforms which guarantees secure HIPAA compliant standards of security. And it's called Chiron Health is one of those secure platforms. So there are options out there for telehealth providers to use these specific platforms that have secure measures already in place to ensure that you're not leaking any of that confidential information that would be violating HIPAA or putting your clients at risk. And as for ensuring the treatment fidelity and implementation by those families and caregivers, there are methods that you can use to assess this, to assess their treatment fidelity and implementation of those procedures. And you can do that by using self-reports of treatments from the family, or you could use permanent products such as maybe video recording certain sessions, or sitting in over video call to just see and do your own treatment fidelity checks to ensure that the interventions are being implemented as they were written to be implemented. And then while individuals in rural areas do lack certain amenities in some cases, the U.S. Census Bureau states that the number of individuals with broadband internet access in rural areas has actually risen from 2% to 61% in the last 15 years. And again, I am going to show you a visual for this. Let me get it pulled up. And so here you can just see that graph from the U.S. Census Bureau that does show that while there is still a gap in individuals who have access to broadband internet, that gap is lessening over time. And while there might be some people who lack that broadband access, again, there are specific secure platforms that actually make up for the lack of that broadband access. So they're designed to work with individuals who don't have access to that high-speed internet. And that concludes my portion of TeleABA for the pros and cons. And so now we are going to move on to Hannah, who will be presenting the pros and the cons for in-home ABA.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm going to be telling you about in-home ABA. I'm going to start with the pros and then work my way through some of the cons. So in-home ABA is done all within the client's home by a in-home provider, not the family, but a trained technician or BCBA And so some of the pros for this service is that we get to work with the kids in their most comfortable environment. The home is where they spend most of their time. That's where they're most comfortable. And so that is where we get good compliance from them and all of those things. So we get to work with them in their most comfortable environment. Because of this, we can do longer sessions. So whereas in a clinic setting or another setting, you may only be able to do a couple of hours at a time, when you're working with a kid in home, you can do, much longer sessions because they're in home, so they can take breaks as needed, they can have access to their families as needed, and it really puts them in the best environment for them to learn. Working in home also helps children with ASD generalize their skills as opposed to working in a clinic setting. The home is where they, again, spend most of their time and are most familiar. And so, of course, that's going to be where they learn skills the best and then generalize those skills throughout other areas of their life. When we work with a child in home, we get to be hands-on while providing treatment. So we know 100% for certain what the treatment fidelity is like, how the programs are being presented, how they're being run, and how the child is responding to them. We get to see it for ourselves. Being in home allows for more parental involvement. The parents, for many companies, the therapist is not to be in the home with the child without a parent or guardian. So usually when the child is receiving services, a parent or guardian will be present, which means that as we are providing services for that child, we can also allow the parent to be involved and provide services as well, so that they get actual hands-on experience of how to run those programs or handle certain behaviors with us there to provide feedback for them. So now I'm going to move on to some of the cons of in-home ABA. So when we're working with a child in home, that can seem invasive for a family. Many clients receive up to 40 hours a week of ABA services, and that's a lot of time for an outside person to spend in someone's home with the family, interacting day in and day out. That can be a big change for a lot of families. And so that can be one of the biggest cons, is that it's such a big change for those families. Another con that we hear a lot is that sometimes the parents are not on board, and so what could be a great opportunity to provide more opportunity for parental involvement is often wasted. Parents are not always willing to participate. And so that participation has been found to be essential in gaining new behaviors and skills, and generalizing those as well. So it's pivotal that they're involved, but the way the in-home ABA sometimes does not allow for that. It could, but it's not always done that way, in the sense that a lot of times techs are running sessions with their clients and parents are off doing something else. And so it's not a requirement for the parents to be involved, and they're missing good opportunities for parental involvement and training. Another con of in-home ABA is the reach. So one of the most pressing concerns that in-home ABA raises is that it does not provide services for individuals that live in rural areas. According to the U.S. Census, 60 million people live in these areas, with 13 million of these being children. Statistically, this would result in approximately 220,000 children not receiving the services that they need to gain skills and thrive. I believe we have a visual.
Yeah, and I will pull that up right now.
I have it too.
So Shanice is going to explain this visual and what we're looking at.
Yeah. So in this visual, we have rural areas in the United States. And the orange spots they're a little less rural, but they're still really rural parts where it's really hard for ABA services to reach. So this is what you're looking at.
Great, thanks. So this can definitely be a problem for those kiddos that are diagnosed with ASD and desperately need the services of ABA, but an in-home person cannot get to them. That's definitely a big problem. Another con for ABA in-home is the cost of in-home ABA. Nicole showed a graphic earlier, if you want to pull that back up, Nicole.
Yeah.
That shows the comparison between in-home clinic and home, or in-home clinic and telehealth ABA. And clearly in-home therapy does cost more, which means that that's more money that families are out of pocket. I believe in-home is the bar over on the left of this graph. And so it shows that it's more expensive services, almost double the cost of telehealth ABA. And so the difference in cost is contributed to the elimination of other service providers, such as RBTs, for example. So in telehealth, those services are not provided by RBTs, they're provided by other personnel. And so because of the need for less personnel, they can cut their costs that way. So now I'm going to counter the cons. One of the cons that we hear the most is that parents are not always on board. And I think a good answer for this is that when we provide in-home ABA, often those services are provided by an RBT who is supervised by a BCBA. And part of what that BCBA will do is come in for a certain time each week or each month and actually provide parent training for those parents. And so they will sit down with the parent, show them exactly how we're handling behaviors, how we're running programs, what those kiddos are working on, and how to implement that in their home. Also, even if a parent is not directly involved in the session, while we're in their home, we can still see how this child interacts with their family and the parents, and can provide feedback based on how the parent is also interacting with the child, just naturalistically in a setting where they're just spending time together, maybe during a break or something of that nature. As far as the rural area, that is a con that in-home ABA often finds difficult to combat. One way that some companies do that, for example, the company that I work for, we have regions of clients and they hire techs within those regions. And so we have a central office, but that we don't report to. We report via the internet. And so we service kiddos all over, some of them even hundreds of miles from our office, just depending on where we're at in the region. And so that's definitely an option for companies, and companies are expanding to do more in-home services that way so that we can really get those services to the kids that need them. As far as the cost of in-home ABA, it is more expensive because it does require more personnel, and oftentimes can even require more time, or not require more time, but gives the option for more time. Some things to consider, though, are that sometimes when we look at the cost, many insurance companies will not cover the cost of telehealth ABA due to services not being provided by a trained provider, but instead being provided by the families. And so with in-home services, often our services are covered by insurance companies, and so that drastically cuts down on the cost for parents. do provide services for those kids, even if the parents are struggling with costs. There are grants and options like that that can help them offset those costs. So that wraps up my presentation of in-home ABA, and I'm going to turn it back over to Shanice for the conclusion.
Okay. For the conclusion, we'll be going over a few points. We'll start off with in-home ABA. In-home ABA is still a strong choice when considering therapy types. It allows for one-on-one training and has a lower risk of releasing confidential information. In-home therapy also allows for the client to receive treatment directly from a trained professional, while also allowing skills as ABA therapy has also allowed for a greater account of treatment fidelity as well. For telehealth ABA, telehealth is a necessity to individuals who are not able to access the services when they live in remote areas where there aren't any BCBAs or clinics found. TeleABA is also found in in-home ABA. Even though there are some concerns with confidentiality, this can be discussed with parents, and there are also services such as the Creone Health that make TeleABA more secure. Conclusion. Does anyone else have any remarks?
I do not. Thank you, Shanice.
Thank you, guys.
I don't either. Thank you very much.
Okay, sounds good. So this is the end of our presentation, and I hope it gives you a better insight of what tele is.
Oh, thanks for watching, everyone.